This meeting is being recorded.
All right, what is going on, guys? Blacklisted Voice, episode 65. We are here with Laura again. We're going to be talking a little bit about mass gaining and bulking today, but just a few kind of things we wanted to hit on before we get started here. We have a camp coming up January 7th and 8th down in Roswell, Georgia. So if you guys are interested in coming to that, you can contact us for more info. The other thing that we're putting on is a nutrition challenge here. Laura, why don't you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I think we kind of have a different viewpoint, or both of us have different viewpoints on kind of the fitness challenges that go on in the fitness community.
Yeah, for sure. So this nutrition challenge, it's a little bit different than I think maybe some people have experience with the nutrition challenges. From what I've seen in the past nutrition challenges, they're very short term and there's not a lot of follow-up or long-term thought process behind it. There might be a little bit, but it's more of a jumping off point to introduce people to nutrition rather than it being something that's like, okay, after this 30 days, this is like your long-term path. It's more of just like 30 days and then kind of done. This nutrition challenge is going to be more geared towards long term so that it's not just like, here's 30 days, we're going to try and lose as much weight as possible, and then that's the end of it. This nutrition challenge is going to be a little bit more geared towards everyone's specific goals and not just weight loss, because not everyone is trying to lose weight. It's more like if someone wants to just clean up their diet a little bit, get a little bit more structured, but they don't necessarily want to lose or gain, that's perfect for them. If someone wants to gain muscle, they can work on gaining muscle. And if they want to lean out, they can do that too. But not everyone is going to have the same goal. And it's going to be a little bit longer than 30 days. But the great thing with this nutrition challenge specifically is that the longer that you are in it, the more you're going to get out of it. And so if you stay in it for 2 months, there's an opportunity to get a discount on further nutrition coaching, but that's to help you to kind of maintain those habits that you're creating and building and not just be kind of like thrown to the wolves of like, okay, you did 30 days. There you go. We're done. Help you make those habits lifelong habits.
Yeah. So this one's going to be a little bit more focused on habit formation rather than like, hey, lose 60 pounds or 30 pounds in 30 days or something like that.
Yeah. And I like that mindset a little bit better. I wanted that mindset in this nutrition challenge so that not everyone goes into it being like, oh, I have to lose weight. And like weight loss is just weight loss. It doesn't necessarily mean you're losing fat. Like you could be losing muscle. You could be losing, muscle tissue, which you don't want to lose that necessarily. It's usually fat you want to lose, but weight loss challenges are always geared towards, did you lower the number on the scale? And that doesn't really mean in the context of athletics or health. It's very general. So this is a little bit geared towards specific goals and helping people build really good habits that are important for strong nutritional practices.
Yeah. And so, like, obviously we're trying to focus on habit building, but like we're kind of advertising this as like everybody's a winner. So like what, in regards to like challenge for this one, like what is the challenge and what are people trying to accomplish in this New Year's kind of resolution kickoff thing?
So one of the biggest things that I work with my clients, usually just to start, is consistency. Because if a client can be consistent 80 to 90% of the time, no matter what their goal is, they will likely reach it. And so the success for a person in this challenge is if they were 80 to 90%, or if they tracked 80 to 90% of the days that they were in the challenge. So they have to adhere 80 to 90% of the time in order to succeed.
Okay. And is that, so like, are we trying to do like literally you hit your macros 80 to 90% of the time, or you input your results 80 to 90% of the time?
Yeah, so the expectation of it would be that we would use MyFitnessPal as the tracker for food tracking, and then I can see it that way. You would need to hit your macros and total calories 80 to 90% of the time within the 2 months
Mm-hmm.
for that to be counted as successful.
Yeah.
So that means tracking and logging your food 80 to 90% of the total days. And of that, you're hitting your calories that amount of time. So it's not like, you don't track 30 days, but then the days that you do track, you're 80 to 90% consistent. It's not actually consistent. You have to track 80 to 90% of the days of the nutrition.
For sure. Yep, totally. And you'll be checking in one time a week with everybody, just kind of via text or email.
Yep, we'll do one check-in a week. We'll have an initial phone call to kind of set up goals, set up some expectations, just chit chat, talk about your goals and what you're looking for. And then after that, we'll have one check-in per week where we can talk about anything. I'll give you feedback. We'll talk about challenges that you're facing, energy, mood, sleep quality, all the normal things as well. And yeah, those are really times for me to kind of talk to you about what is going well and what isn't going well.
For sure. Yeah. And people will also be getting kind of like a little bit of like a 5 to 10 minute read weekly, just like kind of like a little quote unquote newsletter from you as well.
Yep. So every week we'll kind of use a different concept to make the focus of our week, or it can just be some informational nuggets like surrounding sleep quality, how to get better sleep, how to hit your macros if you feel like it's really difficult, just kind of tidbits.
Yeah, sweet. Cool. Well, if you guys want some more information on that, please hit us up. You can hit us up in DMs, email, whatever you guys want to do. And we can give you guys a little bit more information for that. So sweet. Let's get into mass gaining and bulking. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think anybody has like, I mean, maybe there's some people, but like most of the time you get to New Year's and you're like, oh, my New Year's resolution is to gain weight or lose weight, not necessarily gain weight. So kind of, this is, I think, like a fun topic. You pretty much like always hear guys, it's always bulking season. I think is like the big thing in like bodybuilding gyms, So I guess what kind of kick us off, like how does like kind of the nutrition or the macro world define mass gaining or bulking?
So mass gaining or bulking is an intentional increase in calories to purposely gain weight. And depending on who your client is or who you are, it can be for any reason. You could just want to gain weight in general. You could gain weight for a weight class, like if you're a weightlifter, or if you want to put on muscle. Because you really can't build muscle in most situations if you're not eating enough or even over consuming. So that's the purpose of, or the different purposes of wanting to gain weight. And I will say in the CrossFit world, you don't hear people talking about gaining mass as often as you do leaning out or maintaining their physique.
For sure.
And it's, for most CrossFitters, it's probably not, it's not going to be something that they're going to put into their yearly like diet structure. But there is a time and a place where someone could intentionally eat more food to gain muscle. So yeah, just depends on your goals.
I think it's kind of interesting, like an interesting concept in the sport of CrossFit, of like mass gaining or bulking. There is like a population in the sport that does need to put on muscle mass to get stronger. But there's also like kind of like a time period where, hey, you just ran your body into the ground for 8+ months. Like maybe it's time to give it a little bit of a break, and maybe you do put on a little bit of or like up the calories a little bit. That might result in some muscle gain as well, like in your off season. So yeah, it's definitely a interesting concept for the sport of CrossFit.
Yeah. And I don't think I think when people hear mass gaining or bulking, there might be this thought process of like, oh, that means I'm putting on like 10, 20 pounds or like this crazy amount of weight. And that's not true. Like, you don't need to put on 20 pounds of mass just to be bulking. Like, you can be in a very small calorie excess and still be considered like bulking or gaining mass, but not actually like gain a ton of weight. So it's different for everyone, and everyone's different goals. But like, if you're someone who is a smaller CrossFit athlete who, maybe they have a really good aerobic capacity, they can get through high intensity WODs with ease, but when it comes to like a 1 rep max or lifting high percentages of your 1 rep max for time, maybe that's someone that needs to put on some muscle. And so that would be a really great opportunity for them to go through a mass gaining cycle.
Yeah. So are there like different categories of like amount of bulk? So like, is there like a mini bulk for like 1 to 2 pounds, a moderate bulk for like 5 to 10, and then like a super bulk or something like that for like 10 plus? Or
oh yeah,
yeah, you can absolutely kind of categorize it that way? Or
yeah, I mean, that is one really good way of categorizing it. And yeah, I mean, it just like cuts, like you can do a mini cut, you can do a long-term cut. But yeah, I would think that bodybuilders would probably be more on like the high end of that bulking, like, because bodybuilders are that want to build a ton of mass and be really big. But I wouldn't say a CrossFit athlete would necessarily need to put on that much mass, just maybe like a couple pounds, because at the end of the day, they also still have to balance body weight movements. And so if you're gaining 10, 20 pounds, likely some of that is from fat. It's not always going to be muscle, and it is going to be some water weight too. But at some point, you're going to tip the scale towards making other movements a little bit more challenging versus them feeling easier because you have more muscle to move your body.
Okay. So like, with the time, so basically like if you're doing like you were talking about like a mini cut. So like if you were doing a mini bulk, would the time domain change versus doing like a long-term bulk, like, or like a super bulk? Like if you're trying to put on 10 plus pounds, are you looking to put that on over a longer period of time versus 1 to 2, or does the time difference not change at all? Does that question kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that it depends on your client's schedule. So if you have someone that needs to gain weight for a competition, like let's say they're a weightlifter and they have a big competition in a couple weeks and they need to put on 5 pounds, you're probably going to have to, I mean, you only have 6 weeks to put on weight, right? So you're going to have to get weight on them pretty quickly. Which is not super ideal. It's kind of similar to the way where you don't want to lose weight very quickly because it tends to come from muscle tissue. Whereas if you gain weight really quickly, it tends to come in the form of fat tissue. So if you have more time to put on weight, it's likely going to come in the form of muscle tissue. If I'm making sense. So like super quick bulks, fat tissue is usually what you're going to gain. Slower, more intentional bulks tend to be bigger amounts of muscle tissue that you're gaining. But if you're just someone who needs to put on weight, like a weightlifter, you can put weight on quickly, and it's okay if you do build some fat tissue along with muscle tissue because you're just trying to move mass. You're not trying to like move your body weight. You're just trying to move a massive barbell. For a CrossFit athlete, if you have more time to put on weight, that's more ideal because then you likely won't put on as much fat tissue, which will make body weight movements, gymnastics movements feel smoother.
Yeah. So in that regard, like what is kind of like the time frame for like you're wanting to look at people to go into a bulk for? So like and like, let's say you are a CrossFit athlete where you don't want to put on any weight, or you're like a weightlifter that's got a competition 8 months to a year out. Like, what is that
Mhm.
kind of that time frame that you're looking to get a good bulk in that will allow you to put on muscle mass, not necessarily increase your body fat percentage as well?
Mm-hmm. I think I would abide by the same kind of rule as cutting weight. So
Okay.
a rule of thumb is that you don't want to be in a calorie deficit longer than 16 weeks. Like 16 weeks is that's like really at your high end of like that is the longest you want to go. So 12
Okay.
to 16 weeks is kind of like your typical diet phase or your cut phase. I would probably say the same for a weight gain phase, mostly because you want to give your body a break.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a mental aspect to it. There is an aspect of, you really lose your appetite. Food doesn't taste as good. It's not as appealing. And
When
so,
you're bulking?
yes, yeah, that's kind of one of those mental aspects. And it may depend on who you are too.
I've
But
been on a bulk my entire life and food tastes delicious. So.
okay, well, you're an outlier. Okay, I should retract that. If you bulk wisely,
Yeah.
then you can tend to really lose your appetite and lose your
Okay.
desired food, which is
This,
a problem if you're a
yeah.
CrossFit athlete.
Right.
So I would say like anywhere between 12 and 16 weeks is an appropriate amount. And then you
Okay.
can take a break, go back down to maintenance, and then reassess from there.
Yeah. Okay. So is this something like I'm assuming like if you work with somebody who's like, hey, I want to bulk, you kind of have to figure out where their maintenance level is first before you start to kind of like, okay, now we can, hey, you're a quote unquote hard gainer. Here's 7,000 calories that you have to eat in a day. Is that?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Everything revolves around your maintenance. So
Okay.
if you're someone who burns, let's say 2,800 calories a day or 2,900 is your typical maintenance, you need to figure that out first so that you can
Mhm.
intentionally like increase your macros from there. And you usually want to start at around a 10%. So, you don't want to kind of go into it blindly and be like, all right, well, to bulk, I'm just going to eat 5,000 calories a day. That's fine, but you're probably going to gain weight very quickly, and it's probably going to be mostly from fat mass.
Yeah.
If that's what you want, that's totally fine. Most people want to put on muscle tissue. So in order to really foster the growth of muscle tissue, you kind of want to start at a smaller increase, like 10%
Okay.
above. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's like the most you've seen somebody have to like eat to like truly put on weight?
I mean, I know younger males who are like in their 20s. I've seen some of them that have eaten up to like 5,000-6,000 calories a day
And they're
because
like,
they're young and their metabolism is just through the roof.
yeah.
And I mean, being a male, you're obviously going to burn more calories just that way. And they're also training a lot in the gym, which
Hmm.
again, you're burning a ton of calories. So in order just to hit your maintenance, you're eating 3,000 to 4,000 calories. And on top of that, you have to be in your 10% excess. So it can
Hmm.
get very, very high for some individuals.
For sure. So what's the big difference between like a female bulk and like a male bulk? The fact that like males want to bulk and females don't is probably the big one.
Honestly, that's probably the biggest difference is that men, like, society and a lot of like what we're taught is that men need to be bigger and women need to be smaller. So trying to
Hmm.
convince a woman to eat more is the hardest part about bulking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, there's, there is so there's so many more positives to putting on muscle than there are
Hmm.
negatives. And
Yeah.
a lot of women get tied into the idea of image.
Hmm.
Um, and that's just something that's pushed onto us from society, and
Right.
to think about being bulky, and that's where that word bulk is kind of like a
Yeah.
taboo word is like, oh, I don't want to get bulky. It's just a term, really.
Right.
But like, you're not going to look like what Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was at his prime by
Yeah.
eating in a caloric excess and lifting some weights, you're actually just going to look like you have muscle definition.
Right.
And building that muscle helps you age healthier. It helps
Mhm.
you your joints over time. It makes your core muscle stronger. So there's way more benefits to building muscle and bulking wisely than there are to not doing it if you've never done it and you've never built mass.
For sure. So
Yeah.
really, you think the biggest thing between the two is just like kind of like traditional societal views of like women have to be small, men have to be big. That's kind of
Yeah,
like the biggest difference between the two.
absolutely. I have
Yeah.
several female clients right now that I've had to have this conversation with by
Hmm.
saying, we can't keep your calories low this long forever. At
Yeah.
some point, you need to bring them back up so that you can start building muscle. And it's
Yeah.
just, like I think that's such a new concept, even inside the athletic world, where women should eat in excess
For
for
sure.
certain periods of time to build muscle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like it wasn't until CrossFit came around and started to get popular in like 2010 to 14 time frame that it was like
mhm.
seen as okay for women to like, again, quotations here, okay for women to like put on muscle mass, or it became like more, again, quotations, acceptable for
Yeah.
women to do that. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's like it's really within like the last 12 years that like it's starting to be seen as like, hey, this is super good for your health. Like you guys need to, like, everybody needs to be doing this, not just dudes that want to get yoked in the gym, you know?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And when I phrase it in the term of like putting on muscle is good for you for when, for women, when you become
Mhm,
menopausal, you need
mhm,
to have that muscle tissue to protect your joints and
mhm,
not protect your metabolism, but it does help keep your metabolism higher to eat higher protein and to keep
mhm,
muscle tissue on.
mhm,
But imagine being 70 years old and building muscle tissue throughout your life, and now you never have to use assistance to walk, or you don't have to
mhm.
worry about going downstairs. Those are the things that I try and like to plant the seeds of in my clients' minds. Is
Totally.
bulking just for aesthetic? It's not just for looking good.
Right.
There is a purpose for muscle tissue, and it's to help you age well and be autonomous when you're older, and you don't have to be assisted with a walker. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, like, if you're someone who is really active with your life, and the idea of being in a wheelchair or a walker when you're 70, 80 years old isn't what you want,
Hmm.
build a muscle tissue. There you go. It prevents injury. It helps you stay healthy throughout your life. It's just,
Hmm.
what are the long-term purposes of building muscle?
For sure. For sure. Um, Yeah, it's an interesting thought process, because I think a lot of like coaches really tend to think like long term, but it's like society is like just so like focused on the what am I going to look like in a month? What am I going to look like in a
Yep.
week mindset. So it's like so hard to try and bring them to like, hey, what's going to happen to you at age 70 if you keep the current habits that you have of eating and not putting on any muscle mass?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I like talking long term
Hmm.
because it's so easy to get wrapped up in like, I want to lose weight and I want to lose a lot of weight by next week. And then the mindset around that is so unhealthy. And like, even
Yeah.
if you were able to lose 20 pounds in a week, which is crazy, and I don't recommend anyone doing that, it's not long term. It's super unhealthy. There's a ton
Hmm.
of mental issues that can come with that.
Hmm.
And it's in a month, you're not gonna be the same weight because you lost it so quickly. It's probably water weight and muscle
Hmm.
tissue, and now you're just going to gain it back potentially in fat. So
Hmm.
anyway, long-term thinking is so key to
Hmm.
anything bulking, maintaining, losing weight. Keeping that long-term perspective is huge.
For sure, for sure. And even as athletes,
Mhm.
super important.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so we've kind of, I think we've probably hit on this a little bit, but I think the big catchphrase is always like, are you clean bulk? Like this is at least in the guys' world. Are you clean bulking or are you straight bulking? Like
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
one are
Yeah.
you going for? Can you like talk a little bit about about what each of those are and like which one is probably better for you in the long term, or why you might need to quote unquote dirty bulk versus clean bulk?
Yeah. So dirty bulking is when you just eat whatever you want in massive amounts, not really thinking about quality of your food, eating fast food every day, pints of ice cream, like food like that. And it's really easy to overconsume. It's delicious.
It's
And
the
it's
fun one. Let's be honest.
yeah, and it's really easy to overconsume, and of course you're going to gain weight very quickly eating
Mhm.
that way. And so that's your dirty bulk. Clean bulking is more like, it looks more like what your appropriate maintenance calories would look like. So,
Mhm.
body weight, protein in grams. So like if you're a 200-pound male, you're eating 200 grams of protein, eating 30% of your diet from fat and then the rest from carbs. That's
Mhm.
more of like a clean balance. And
Okay.
then like the excess calories is like 10% above your maintenance. It's not like crazy amounts of calories. And it's structured in a way that it's probably coming mostly from carbohydrates. And
Okay.
you're still tracking that every day. So that's what I would
Yeah.
think is more of like along the clean bulking.
Clean bulk. So when would like it does somebody ever want to dirty bulk? Like, is that bringing it back to like, hey, you have a weightlifting meet in 6 weeks, like go get McDonald's breakfast every day or something, like.
I personally don't think anyone should dirty bulk. I think here's the thing. There is definitely a time and place for eating really hypocaloric foods like McDonald's or whatever foods like that. They do have a
Okay.
time and place in a hypocaloric diet, but I would not suggest doing that for 100% of your meals.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So like you would like maybe, like 30% tops would be something that you're looking for inside of a dirty bulk.
Yeah. And I think like I I would want there to be a bigger purpose behind it than just like,
Mhm.
ooh, I can eat McDonald's today. More so, sorry.
Oh,
I
you're
would
good.
more so suggest it if you have a person who is really, really struggling to eat above their maintenance.
Oh,
So like
okay. Yeah.
if you have someone who like has no appetite, food
Mhm.
doesn't sound appealing, they don't want to eat anything, and the only thing that sounds delicious to them is a whatever quarter pounder with bacon or whatever, then
Chick-fil-A.
yes, then I would highly suggest them to eat that because that's the only way they're going to get their calories in.
Okay.
So that's kind of where those hyper palatable foods have a role in the diet.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
It's it's not just something where it's like, hey, we're going to put you in a hypercaloric state, go ham, don't count your calories, just eat whatever you want.
Hell
Of
yeah.
course you can eat that way, obviously.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you want to do it wisely and with purpose, you use those types of foods in a in the instance where like you just physically cannot get yourself to eat white rice, beans, potatoes, chicken, like you just can't force yourself to eat it. So eat
Yeah.
something that does sound appealing.
So like dirty bulking could almost be seen, could almost be seen as more of like, hey, we're going to use this concept as more of a tool for somebody who
Yes.
is having trouble, with getting like maybe they are like the hard gainer who's like in his 20s and has to eat 5,000 calories a day, and he's like, cool, another 2 cups of rice, fuck this. Like
Yes.
they
Yeah.
they you could kind of supplement that with some sort of like meal from a fast food place, or like, hey, you can, ice cream or something like that.
Yes. Absolutely. It is a tool, just like, using the scale to
Mhm.
understand where your body mass is at. It's just a tool. It's something that you can fit into your overall diet pretty easily. You just don't want to rely on it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. um Sweet. Yeah, that's cool. So you did touch on this a little bit, but What would be like your ideal macros for bulking? Like, are people wanting to eat more protein because protein's involved in like the amino acid building process and like building
Mhm.
and synthesizing muscle? Like, so are people wanting to eat more protein in a bulking phase? Are they wanting to, eat more fats? Are they wanting to eat more carbs? Like, what is kind of like the macro count that you guys are kind of going for?
So how I would do it is I would actually reduce the person's protein intake. So let's
Okay.
just hypothetical person, this 200-pound man who eats 200 grams of protein a day. If he
Okay.
wanted to put on weight, I probably would actually have him eat more around the 170
Hmm.
grams of protein a day and then supplement his excess calories with carbs. And
Okay.
the reason I would do that is because carbs are very, very easy to overconsume, and they
Okay.
are not always as filling as protein, where protein is a very satiating, very slowly digesting macro. And if you're eating a lot of protein, your appetite is probably going to plummet and you're going to be full all the time. You're
Hmm.
not going to want to eat the amount of calories that you need to gain mass. And so
Okay.
to counter that, you reduce your protein intake and then supplement it with carbs. And I think
Okay.
you were right. You need protein for the amino acid building blocks to make muscle tissue. But the great thing about building muscle tissue is that you only need the proper amount of amino acids present to build muscle tissue. And if there is, sorry, my dog is really distracting
All,
me.
all good. All good.
If you are in a hypocaloric state or a maintenance state, your body is not going to use those amino acids for energy. They're going to build muscle tissue from it. So you just need the right amount present to build muscle. And when you're in a hypocaloric state, you can still lower your protein intake and have plenty of amino acids to build muscle tissue because your body is going to prioritize carbohydrates for energy and not amino acids.
Okay. So if
Is
somebody
that
were, sorry, I missed that last part there.
Oh, I just said hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, yeah. So pretty much you're like, because proteins are a little bit more satiating, you want to almost lower that number. And because carbs are a little bit easier to eat, you're going to bump that number up because really
Mm-hmm.
all we need is the correct amount of amino acids in our body, which, is whatever number that is.
Mm-hmm.
And then whenever that amount is in the body and we're hypocaloric, our body will automatically start to use that excess to build muscle. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yep. Yes.
Sweet. So, like, if somebody were to be able to sustain higher levels of protein, they're like, I love steaks and eggs. Like, that's pretty much what I eat all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, would you look at keeping their protein content high still, or would you still want to try and drop them down so that they're eating mostly carbs? Or sorry, not mostly carbs, but do what you were saying before.
Yeah. Um, Again, all contextual, depends on the person.
Okay.
If a person is only able to eat an excess of food by eating steak and eggs, their favorite food, then
Mhm.
yeah, I would definitely encourage them to keep that in their diet. If they are a CrossFit athlete, though, there might be an issue of digestion. If they're
Mhm.
eating a ton of really rich protein that may be higher in fat content, they're going to find that they're not digesting their food fast enough to go train again. And that's a huge issue with athletes who train 2 sessions a day,
Mhm.
unless they have like 6 hours to digest this meal. If they're a
That would be
one training session a day athlete, then it's probably not that big of a deal. They can
okay.
they can eat that in after their training session. But if they're a 2-day athlete, it's probably not going to be right for them because they're just not going to be able to digest quickly enough. And so in that
Okay.
instance, I would probably suggest that they limit that type of protein
Mhm.
to like after they're completely done training. Maybe it's their evening meal before they go to bed. But for the rest of their calories, they're definitely going to want to rely on carbohydrates just
Okay.
so that they can digest really quickly.
Yeah, yeah. Um, So is there like, kind of diving a little bit deeper into that, is there like a specific timing structure to bulking? Like, is it, like, I think there's a lot of information around fueling for CrossFit and like timing for, optimal performance, but is there like a specific timing structure for, like optimal protein synthesis or?
Like during the day, like just in a typical day.
Yeah, in a typical day or just, throughout, pretty much a typical day.
Yeah. So there's actually a lot of there's a lot of scientific research on this.
Mhm.
And I think that the consensus is it doesn't really matter when you consume your protein because
Okay.
you're still going to build muscle tissue. You can consume your protein throughout the day. You can consume it in two meals if you want.
Mhm.
Um, and it doesn't really have a metabolic difference on your ability to build muscle tissue or not. So
Okay.
it mostly it comes down to how much you're able to eat in a meal, which most people can't eat more than like 50 grams at a time.
Mhm.
And it's going to take you so long to digest that, 4 hours after you just eat this massive meal of protein, you're probably still not going to be hungry.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't even know what does 50 grams of protein even look like?
Like 8 ounces of steak,
Okay.
maybe like 7 ounces, maybe more like 7 ounces, but that's a big chunk of steak. Or maybe
I
that's
wish I
normal for you. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. I see stuff on a menu and they're like ounces. I'm like, oh, biggest one, whatever. So I wish I knew ounces better, or like
Yeah.
what that actually like looked like.
Yeah.
But like in regards to bulking, then it's a little bit easier to manage because you just kind of have to get the macros in. You're not looking for performance. Your timing doesn't have to be perfect with everything as long as you're in that hypocaloric state and you're getting your protein in.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and your carbohydrates, like they're all going to be important.
Mhm.
But yeah, at the end of the day, it's super important that you are just consistently hitting that your target amount of calories.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, okay, so again, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but like, is there a specific time of year that you would recommend for mass gaining, bulking? Like, if you're an athlete, if you're an average person, is
Mm-hmm.
there a difference between the two? Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you're just someone who in general wants to gain some mass, it's not related to any sort of event that's coming up or a competition.
Mhm.
Personally, I would recommend the winter time, and it's just because most people can feel a little bit more uncomfortable carrying around more weight, so that you're wearing more layers. And it kind of like, I don't, it kind of hides it, I guess. That's the only really
Okay.
big way of saying it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're someone who doesn't care, you can do it any time of the year. But
Okay.
if I had someone who was like really wanting to put on a ton of mass, but it was a concern of theirs of like their clothes fitting different or looking a certain way, winter, just do it in the winter. Plenty of
Hmm.
time to gain, and then go into a mini cut after if you wanted to lose any of the fat that you gained.
Hmm.
Um, for an athlete, like let's say we're talking about a CrossFit athlete because that's our main demographic
Hmm.
for Blacklisted. Um, I would probably say you'd want to go into a bulk like right after season is done, like right after
Okay.
the games are done. You want to go into an intentional bulk. Now, this is not something where you're like, okay, cool, like it's the end of the season, I'm just going to eat whatever, I'm going to drink beer every day, I'm going
Hmm.
to have burritos with tons of cheese, like like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like an intentional bulk that we just talked about, where you're
Hmm.
eating mostly carbs, intentional fat, and intentional protein.
Hmm.
And the reason I would do right after season is so that you have time to build your mass and then get back down to maintenance. And if you wanted to do a mini cut after that to get back down to competition weight, now you have time to do that. And it's not just
Hmm.
like a rush to the open of like, oh my gosh, I still have 5 pounds of extra weight that I'm carrying.
Yeah.
You want to
Yeah.
give yourself plenty of time to really come back down to that maintenance weight that you want to compete at.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And it seems like I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on this, but it just seems like there's more of like a hormonal profile that comes along with that as well. Like if you are an athlete who's like trying to artificially suppress like your weight by being a little bit caloric like maintenance or deficit year round, seems like you could probably help the body recover a little bit easier hormonally too from, bumping up into like a quote unquote gaining phase, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. That is actually one really big benefit. I didn't even really think about talking about that, but it's a great point that if you're someone who's so structured throughout the year or
Hmm.
even like calorie deficit, giving your body extra food is going to spike your metabolism. And that's just really how metabolism works. It's going to speed up when you eat more food, and it's going to slow
Hmm.
down when you eat less food. But if
Hmm.
you're able to give your body a break from rigid diet structure and maybe just like eat a little extra food for a couple weeks to a month,
Hmm.
you're going to fire up your metabolism and really heal, again, quote, heal your hormones that may have been kind of out of whack during the
Hmm.
season.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So it's almost like a little bit of like a metabolism boost more so than like a hormonal boost, and that kind of like might maybe fix some of the hormonal problems that have been going on.
Yeah, yeah. Fix is, that's a probably not the right term, but it's
Yeah, I wonder what
appropriate
you.
enough right now.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think of like a better term for that.
Uh, what is homeostasis? That's the word. I
Yeah,
bet that's
okay,
probably
yeah.
like the scientific word
Re-
for it.
yeah, return back to homeostasis. Yeah, that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
um, Sweet. Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on a lot here. Do you have any other kind of like things that you maybe wanted to hit on, or?
Um, no, I mean, we talked about a lot of different aspects about bulking, and I think I just want to reiterate the point of how important it is to
Hmm.
utilize bulks and masses to put muscle on. Because
Hmm.
in very rare occasions, so like you always talk about, or not, nutrition coaches will get this question and this goal all the time of like, I want to lean out and I want to build muscle.
Hmm.
And every nutrition coach knows that is very difficult to do and can generally only happen for someone who like is brand new to weightlifting and brand new to dieting or
Or
change
has like the
structured nutrition.
genetic, or has like the genetic profile to do it.
Yes, absolutely, which is again very rare.
Yeah.
And so being able to utilize those massing phases to build lean muscle tissue is so important to understand where it fits into like your goals so that you're
Hmm.
not just like constantly trying to lose body fat
Hmm.
and like always in a uh, um not eating enough calories, that's what I'm trying to say. You're just kind of going through that cycle of like always trying to lose weight, always trying to lose weight, but never really utilizing the bulking phases. I mean, you're
Hmm.
missing a huge aspect and something that will really help you down the line.
Hmm. For sure, for sure. Yeah, yeah. Is there maybe we have some like women who are like listening to this that are like kind of like still on the fence about like maybe trying out a bulking phase or like looking into it. Like, is there some advice you could give to them, or like, some maybe like reassurance that like, hey, it's gonna be like some, maybe just some thoughts on that?
Yeah. So what I always like to discuss with my female clients is, first of all, it is temporary. It
Hmm.
is not like what I say, and what I mean by temporary is you're only going to be gaining weight temporarily. It is
Hmm.
not forever. It is not for years and years. It is for a temporary amount of time. And typically that weight gain and that, extra little weight that you're carrying around is probably going to be from water weight as you build muscle.
Hmm.
And so like there is going to be a little bit of fat tissue that you gain, but if you gain 5 pounds in 2 weeks, it most likely is water.
Hmm.
Um, and that is very easy to, it's very easy to lose water weight. I mean, you can lose water weight like overnight almost, but
Sit in
the
the
point of
sun
it
and
is it's
dehydrate
not
yourself.
permanent. Yeah. But that's kind of the point I try to hit home with my female clients or any clients that really
Yeah.
struggle with this idea is that it is temporary. And yes, your clothes might fit a little tighter, but long term, you are doing something that is so healthy for your body by gaining muscle tissue. And it's going to help you age really well. It's going to help protect your joints. It's going to help, like if you think about how devastating it is when you have a grandparent that falls and they break their hip, building muscle tissue is going to make you more resilient through age.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
reduce your chances of doing something like that.
For sure. Yep. I had a great grandma that fell, and she was, in the nursing home for the rest of her life. So totally understand that.
Yeah.
I was gonna make a joke earlier also when you were talking about how like you might want to bulk during the winter time frame, because you have like baggier and layers on. Guys probably want to bulk in the summertime when they have t-shirts that they can make look tighter.
See, it's all contextual, all
Yeah,
depending
right.
on who you are.
Yeah. So, well, cool, Laura. Thanks for coming on and talking about this. I think it's a pretty it's definitely a different topic when it comes to CrossFit athletes. I don't think that there's a lot of CrossFit athletes that have necessarily explored bulk or weight gain. And I think it's probably like you were talking about, an underutilized tool for health purposes as well. So
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, awesome. I really enjoyed talking about it.
For sure. And if you guys are looking to build some habits, hit us up about our nutrition challenge. And if you're looking to kind of like get your foot in the door and then retain those habits throughout the year, this challenge we're putting on is going to be great for you. So hit us up for more details on that. Thanks again, Laura. Make sure you like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram, blacklisted.hq, and we will catch you guys next time.
See ya.